It's time to talk about grinding. Oh, not the fun kind between two or more people, but the kind we both love and hate in JRPGs. Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun. Dai-chan here. Pretty much everyone who's played a JRPG before has experienced the phenomena known as grinding, where you repeat a certain process multiple times to level up your party members. What I want to explore are the pros and cons of grinding, whether it's seen as therapeutic repetition, a necessary evil, or a plague on the entire genre. I also wish to figure out if there's a line to be drawn on what counts as too much grinding by looking into the ways certain games have implemented it for better or for worse. One can certainly argue that grinding is inherently part of what defines a JRPG, because it allows for what I call internal or character-based growth. Inversely, pretty much every video game has what I call player growth, where we as players naturally get better at a game through repeated play. We improve our reflexes, better understand a game's mechanics, and learn where all the hidden secrets are in a game. Your success on, say, Super Mario is entirely dependent on your own personal skill in navigating the timing of jumps and knowing where all the shortcuts and power-ups can be found. It's this kind of growth that allows for speedrunners to completely dominate a difficult game as though it were child's play. JRPGs certainly involve this type of growth, especially in action-oriented ones. But JRPGs stand out because these characters you control within a game grow as a result of your actions. They permanently get better at what they do, typically fighting, the more you play the game. Most commonly, this entails gaining experience from fights. And when that experience reaches set thresholds, your characters level up and enjoy an increase to their stats, making them deal more damage out, take less damage from foes, getting faster, or any number of improvements. This can also refer to earning points that can individually be applied to stats at the whim of the player, allowing for greater customization of a character's build. Other times, it's as simple as earning money to spend on weapons that change your character stats. All of these count as character-based growth. In some ways, this can feel more like growing a garden or raising a pet than mastering a skill, but there are plenty of merits for internalized growth mechanics. For one, it allows players to manage the pace of their game experience. If you reach an area that you want to spend more time in, RPGs give you the chance to stick around and fight as many battles as you'd like before moving on. You're in control of the experience, and there's no timer to rush you through. No on-rails sections that force you to play a certain way. By the same token, this puts players in control of the game's difficulty. If you run into a difficult enemy, you can grind on weaker enemies until your character gains a high enough level to defeat the stronger enemy more easily. This also provides more ambitious players the chance to fight enemies at a low level for the sake of challenge. Honestly, I think the greatest appeal to grinding is that it gives players a sense of ownership over their investment. While we no doubt feel accomplished when we get better at something, when we improve on a skill such as drawing, playing a sport, performing a laborious task, or anything of personal value, there's no guarantee that continued practice of these skills will result in rapid improvement. For instance, you could spend your entire life practicing Super Mario Bros. And still not be able to claim the world record speedrun. RPGs, however, provide players a permanent, guaranteed reward for their invested time. If you put in the work, your party will get stronger and be more able to take on their game's toughest foes. Even if defeating a powerful boss only came about through repeating a much simpler task, you still earned that victory by putting in the time. Sure, it's something other people could also do just as well, but the fact is that you took the time to actually do it, and you're rewarded for that. Unlike other games, or skills one can master, it's relieving to know that your growth is guaranteed. Of course, for many, grinding is the sole reason people stay away from the genre. Playing these games can often be extremely repetitive and tedious, yet one person's trash is another's treasure. Some people love the grind, as it's a simple practice that requires little focus. It can be therapeutic in that players can repeat a process they're already familiar with, allowing them to both play the game and focus on other things such as music, conversation, TV, or whatever else is going on in the background. This is great for developers because it allows them to increase a game's length and playtime without making more content. All they have to do is adjust the numbers so that players have to repeat tasks before they're strong enough to proceed. The tricky part of requiring this grind is that players are no longer immersed in the experience. The process can become so mechanical that you're going to run through motions instead of having fun. For instance, the background of this video you're watching comes from the game Utawareru Mono: Mask of Truth. It's part of a trilogy of visual novels with tactics-based combat. I love the game dearly, and for the most part, it's paced quite well, requiring little to no grinding to complete the story. The post-game, however, introduces what is called the Dream Arena, which is a series of extra missions that increase in difficulty. If you hope to beat these challenges, you're going to have to repeat previous missions to grind for experience, as well as a currency called BP that can be spent to individually increase your party member stats. Simply fighting each battle once won't get you anywhere near the amount of BP needed to push through some of the arena's challenges. While repeating previous missions can be a fun way to re-experience the story or try out different strategies, the devs must have forgotten that when faced with a task, players are likely to seek out the most efficient way to complete it. The result is what you see here. There are at least 2 missions that end after killing a single enemy, and in the post-game, you're strong enough to kill that enemy in a single turn. Repeating this mission is the most effective way I've found to grind BP. And while it's not as fun as playing a variety of older challenges, it's definitely quicker. So, for a few hours at a time, I've been repeating this exact cycle while listening to Ask Reddit videos on my phone. As someone who's been playing JRPGs for decades, it's become something I'm totally used to. And yet, when I step back and look at it, I can't help but wonder, was this really what the developers intended? Did they really consider this part of the game's experience? Sure, you can blame me for exploiting this method, but even while doing it, it's a severe time investment. So does that mean the devs intended for this to take even longer? That's pretty severe. Typically, I consider an RPG well-balanced if, by fighting every naturally encountered battle along the journey, I'm more than strong enough to deal with the bosses thrown my way. In theory, I shouldn't have to grind to complete the story, as long as I'm not skipping or running from fights. One of the games that does this almost too well is Kingdom Hearts. The game tells you what level you should be at to visit each of the Disney worlds, and it's actually pretty tough to get much higher than that recommended level. While it's nice knowing I don't have to grind, I feel like the game's awareness of my current strength kinda robs me of the progress I've earned. To some extent, it might as well do away with the RPG elements and instead just reward Sora with new abilities at specific points in the story. But does that mean without a harsh grind, I'm not actually owning my own experience? Figuring out how to balance this bizarre balance of grind is something developers are still trying to perfect, and a lot of games do it better than others. Let's look at some of them. An example of a game that does grinding right is Xenoblade Chronicles, specifically the Definitive Edition. While each new area in the game presents you with foes you'll have to level up to even consider fighting, it provides you with a few different methods of earning that experience that you actually feel motivated to pursue. For one, the locations are vast and brilliant. Not only is it fun to just see the sights, but you also get rewarded experience for exploring new parts of the map. This discourages you from fighting the same enemy at the same point. Furthermore, the game has a vast assortment of side quests that give you just as much, if not more, experience than straight-up grinding. Even better, these quests task you with fighting certain enemies or exploring specific areas you might not have known existed until you were pointed in the right direction. Basically, you're encouraged to experience everything the game has to offer, rather than boiling down the experience to a handful of efficient yet boring processes. In contrast, we have games like God Eater, Monster Hunter, Freedom Wars, and Ragnarok Odyssey. These RPGs eliminate combat experience altogether, instead relying on players constantly upgrading their equipment. That in itself is fine, but you don't just buy that equipment. You have to craft it using the items dropped by different enemies. When it comes to drop rates, we have to farm for items, which is even worse than grinding. Instead of gaining a small but certain amount of strength from each fight you participate in, farming has you repeating fights for the mere chance of getting something you need to progress. It's frustrating because an item that took you 100 fights to drop could have dropped on the very first one, leaving you with 99 wasted attempts that amounted to absolutely nothing. You're essentially gambling with your free time. Farming gets even sillier when you try to see it from a story perspective. In real life, if you hunt and kill a deer, you get its meat, hide, hooves, antlers, teeth, whatever you need. Put that same deer into a JRPG, however, and you might have to wipe out the entire forest just to get your hands on a single hide. Like, seriously, how many dragons do I have to kill before I obtain a single fang, claw, or scale? Some of these farming games have one saving grace: a ticket or bartering system that lets you trade the more common items an enemy did drop for its more rare ones. If you need a dragon fang but only got dozens of scales, or something more commonly dropped, you can exchange those multiple scales to get one fang. More often than not, however, these games will put players in what I call the fuck chain. Let's say you're trying to defeat a dragon, but can't. You keep losing the fight, and so you figure the only way to get stronger is to upgrade your gear to the next tier. Sure enough, there's a sword and armor you can forge, but it turns out the materials you need to craft them come from the same damn dragon you're struggling to kill in the first place. If you already had the strength to repeatedly fight that dragon to farm its drops, you wouldn't need the upgraded weapon to begin with. Typically, the only way to get around this is to have people online help you kill the dragon, which sucks if a game doesn't have a huge player base or proper matchmaking. As if that weren't bad enough, it forces you to rely on players who have already gone through this tedium, gotten strong enough to farm the dragon. Not everyone playing these games is kind enough to stick around an earlier mission just to help people out. Like, that's literally what bodhisattva do in Buddhism. They've reached enlightenment, but set aside nirvana to instead help others along the process. Your average gamer isn't that kind. The Tales games each have different approaches to the grind. Syria in particular is fantastic about this. Not only does the game have an addictive action battle system that makes fighting fun and engaging, it also has all sorts of things that level up beyond your party's base stats. Your arts level up from using them frequently, you can learn skills from your equipment by wearing it into battle, and you're incentivized to try out different combos and elements on a variety of enemies. This discourages players from staying in one place fighting the same encounter over and over again. You're not always needing to seek out the most efficient method, as even weaker enemies still have merit to them. On the other hand, we've got Tales of Zysteria. The game itself is okay, but there is a section at the end of the game where you'll need a lot of money. So much money, in fact, that it'd be foolish not to maximize your efficiency. Thus, players are stuck grinding a rare golem that can be exploited for gold. It's a complex procedure that you need to pay attention for, making it excruciating. The E series is a lot better about grinding. Because these are fast-paced action games, repeating certain sections is actually quite fun, because otherwise, you don't have time to truly appreciate each area you visit. It all goes so quickly that stopping to level up on a new enemy only takes a few minutes and makes a huge difference. The newer games in the franchise have even added skills that level up as you use them, letting you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Xenoblade Chronicles X is one of my all-time favorite games, but I must admit its post-game can be rather frustrating. Your characters have a level cap of 60, meaning that most of your growth comes from your gear and the accessories you put on it. All the good ones need to be crafted from enemy drops, and that can sometimes be agonizing with how low the drop rates can get. Players actually got around this somewhat by exploiting the online co-op. Turns out you can grind one of the online raid bosses, entering the fight, breaking its various weak spots, and then quitting the mission to quickly make out with some rare items. You can then sell those items for tickets that can be exchanged for a number of rare monster drops. The second video I ever put out on this channel shows this exact process. It's crazy to think Monolith Soft actually wanted players to do this. It's not like there's a more effective method out there after all. Personally, the Valkyria Chronicles games, while fun, were completely ruined by the way they deal out experience. In those games, you get more experience per mission the higher your end rank is. Sadly, the only factor that contributes to your mission rank is how fast you complete the mission. This encouraged players to forego most of the game's mechanics, to instead exploit the scout units that can move the furthest in a single given turn. It's often possible to slip a single scout past all the difficult enemies in a mission, such that the only enemies that matter are the few hanging out at their main base. A well-timed grenade and some healing is usually all it takes to complete a rather long mission in record time. You hardly get anything from playing the missions the way they were meant to be played, using all the different units and actually clearing a safe path to the enemy base. In fact, doing that punishes you because it takes longer, causing you to get a lower rank and, in turn, less experience. By far, however, the most extreme grind I've experienced in a JRPG has come from Fate Grand Order. You all know what I'm talking about. Right off the bat, your servants don't level up from combat. If you want to level them up, you've got to grind the crap out of Chaldea Gate for embers, or buy them using mana prisms or through events. In order to enjoy the main story, you first have to level up your party outside of the main game. Ascension materials are also difficult to come by. It's a huge grind to repeat the story missions for the chance of an enemy dropping what you want, which means you're better off getting those mats from event shops. These events, however, are grinding factories of their own. Simply completing all the nodes in an event doesn't even begin to equip you with enough items to buy out the shop. Rather, you'll be repeating the same nodes again and again. The only saving grace is that you can find ways to end battles in fewer turns, and there are craft essences for each event that increase the number of item drops needed for the shop. That said, those craft essences need to be purchased for a hefty sum of those items, meaning that you have to first grind in an inefficient manner before you can earn the chance to grind for real. It's like a grinder's entry fee that resets every event, requiring you to buy new craft essences each time. As if that weren't bad enough, all these events are time-sensitive, so you have no choice but to grind for hours on end on the game's schedule. Like seriously, I don't mind spending hours on a good grind, but I like to do it on my terms. If FGO weren't such a popular game with tons of waifu and friends who relate to the struggle, it wouldn't be worth the effort. In the end, I've got mixed feelings about grinding. For me, I think the key to a better gaming experience comes from giving players more freedom. Let grinding be a way for players to get ahead of the difficulty curve, rather than a requirement to proceed. It's best when developers avoid pushing players into very limited, repetitive grinding strategies, and instead encourage players to use all their game's features and mechanics along the way. While I love taking the time to grind every now and then, it can be frustrating when the rewards come too slowly, or in the case of item drops, sometimes not at all. Even so, I personally welcome grinding if it means customizing my progress and taking ownership of my character's growth. How about you, though? Do you enjoy grinding? Do you hate it? Can you provide more examples of games that either handle grinding well or completely butcher it? I look forward to hearing from you in the comments below.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this channel, help me beat the algorithm by liking, commenting, and sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and, most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of my anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content. If you want to support me directly, there are now 3 ways that all provide the same benefits. You can click Join here on YouTube, or join Patreon or Subscribestar for access to exclusive vids and early access. As always, celebrate your fandom.